Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us to have a look at how we can enhance collaboration between teams through the use of Evolution MX. This is going to be the time portal option, which allows for the collection of time worked on site by individuals to be collected at source and then sent through to the payroll for approval and then subsequent posting into the payroll for processing. And secondly, we're going to look at mobile forms, the collection of site form information, something you're probably doing already in some form or other. This allows us to use or piggyback onto the back of document management features within inside Evolution MX to capture those forms from source, store them against the contract area, and provide analytical information on them. The session today is being recorded, and that'll be forwarded to you in due course, where you can watch that at leisure and share with the other individuals. Time Portal then can be accessed through a web browser, as I will do in a moment, but more likely it's going to be accessible through a mobile device, such as a tablet or probably a mobile phone. So I'm going to access it through a browser and just pick up the option for Time Portal. It allows you to access this through an email. So this will be your work email address and it'll be linked to your employee record within the payroll. So I'll be able to select that so as it can approve me for use of the Time Portal with an appropriate password, of course. Now, the screen that you see will be dependent on how it's been configured for you. So it will load a screen of information that will allow for the input of new time information, as is illustrated here on the left-hand panel. And I've also chosen to have 4 tiles of information displayed as well, which tell me what's been happening so far this week or what is in progress, and also historically in the week previous. The entries that you see here are entirely up to you. They just track the progress of the timesheets or the time cards being entered in the system. So it's telling me I've had 2 hours submitted so far that have both been approved and processed through to the awaiting payroll. It's entirely up to you how many of these tiles there are and what that information might present. The screen is going to be tailored, I suppose, to suit the device that it's been operated under. So if you are accessing this on a mobile device, such as a mobile phone, you'll see the screen looks a lot more mobile friendly. And that means that you're allowing for input to be made at the top section, and the bottom tiles allow for the display of information already held by the system. So as an operative, I'll be entering my own time. I'll use the enter time option here to be able to select or input and say the time that's worked. It always remembers the last date and details that you used, but you can always override those. So if I were to do one, say for yesterday, I can specify here the job number using an onboard browse of the current job numbers. So you'll be able to browse to the job that was particularly relevant. Okay, and that could be configured to make sure it's only the jobs that are relevant for that particular individual. The rest of the input is configurable to suit the style that's required of the individual operative. That means that we could make, for example, a description field available and perhaps make that mandatory to say they've got to put something in at that point. So I could be putting in an entry for Tuesday AM, for example, just so that it can assist with the approval process. If there's some ambiguity as to why the hours are being claimed, then that is a perfect explanation for it, and the approver will be able to see that as he is working on the information that's been sent to him. Now, it's also up to you whether the entry of the time takes the form, as I've got it here, of a start and an end time, or whether it's a straightforward number of hours. And that can be decided upon by the individual's preference. So you set an employee profile to each person to specify how their input screen works, basically. So here it's expecting me to put in a start and finish time. So if I was to put in 9 to 11, perhaps as a daily break, again, that's a configurable option or not to be included and maybe taken off the time that's ultimately paid. You could alternatively have hours input, as I say, put in as a number of hours. I've chosen this against overtime, probably unlikely that you'd allow the individuals to put overtime on themselves, but maybe you would, I don't know. But this is just an illustration as to how the hours input could be on a number of hours rather than a start and finish time. Thirdly, I've got an option here for what I'm calling allowance, which is just an expense claim of some sort. So it allows us to just put in a value associated with what they'd like to claim for parking or toll charges or whatever it may be. Okay, now at this point, it is going to be creating an individual time card for a combination of the job number and the date. So I could, at this point, just hit submit at the top, and that would be sending that off to approval as an individual time card. Or I could just save it, return to it later, because I'm maybe not sure how long I'm going to be spending. Maybe I'm going to spend a bit longer. So you could have that saved, or you could use a submit ad, which means that I've got another job to do on the same day, or it's the same job but on a different day. So you could be adding multiple records at the same time. If I just hit submit, then that is going to include on the count at the bottom there. You can see it's saying submitted now 4 hours. The approver would access the time portal under their own login, and they would then have an approve option. So just to save me logging out, logging in again, I've got the approve option available to my login as well, which is probably going to be a little unusual. But the mechanism here would allow you to go into approve. Let me just make the screen larger because it's probably going to be done on a larger basis by somebody who is approving. Click on approve, and it will display for you all the entries as the approver. It allows you to see the information. As I scroll across, you can see the start and end times, the number of hours, the job that was worked on. I've also got the justification, the description is being shown as well. So if I'm at all unhappy with that, then I can always use the reject option here. That will then send and reject an email back to the operative, advising them they've got to make a resubmission on their timesheet. If, however, you are happy with it, it's just a case of ticking it. That tick is sufficient to be approved. So as you leave the screen, it will now mark that as being approved and ready to be imported through the timesheets, the managed timesheets module inside Evolution MX, which we'll come to in a second. Okay, one other option you've got available to you within the time portal is the option for crew. Now that's useful in terms of collaborating information between the teams. So it's where the teams themselves don't necessarily make the entry of the data, but the site manager is going to bring all that information together. So using the crew option, I've been set up as a user who can do both their own timesheets and crew options. So it allows me to make a selection here to say I'm now actually entering a crew timesheet. Now in principle, it's the same thing. It's going to create a time card for each combination of employee, job and day. It allows you to be able to create a new entry. So I could be creating an entry here for maybe the 8th, should we say, for whatever job it might be. Say it's a different job with a description, which again can be made mandatory. And you could be saying here it's going to be from 15 till 16. So you're basically doing here is you're creating a template. Okay, and then from that, you can view your individual time or generate individual time, I should say, which is going to say, right, these are the people under your control. So it's now going to create a time card for each of them based upon that template you just put in, the hour on Tuesday afternoon. So generate new crew timesheets means they are now created. You can then edit them if you need to. So if there is a slight difference between one or other of them, then you can do so. The alternative would be that you view the individual time, showing any records that might have already been created through that template entry, but allow also for you just to be able to add ad hoc entries. So you're able here to select a new entry for a member of your team. Okay, and that could be on specifically and individually for them to say it was this job on this date for this number of hours. So however the timesheet entries are recorded, whether they're done through the crew option or on an individual basis, they will still be subject to approval. And then once approved, they become available for access through Evolution MX. So if we return to Evolution MX now, I've got the timesheets module available to me here. The managed timesheet entry will allow me to retrieve information that's been submitted through source and approved, and allow for that to be imported, subject to maybe a further approval or two if you wanted to, but ultimately be able to be passed on to the payroll. So at this point, I've got an import option at the top there, where if I click it, it will retrieve the information that's been approved through Time Portal. So my crew timesheets haven't been approved, therefore they're not showing at this point. But the one I did earlier for the 9 till 11 for that particular user is being shown there. At this point, as an administrator, you've got the ability to edit it. So if you want to override the time, maybe recognizing that a break should have been taken off or that overtime should have been allowed, then that's perfectly at your disposal. Submit for approval is where it will send it to the payroll. It's termed submit for approval because it could actually involve a further level of approval, a bit like the workflow setups that we've got, and some of you may be familiar with in use through the invoice register, for example. But submit for approval would be the way of telling the system, right, I want that to go off to payroll. It's then submitted, and if you wanted to check on it through the payroll, saving you having to manually enter the pay details, they'll have automatically been fed through. For that user, we can see the entries that have come through. So we've got the time being recorded, they're 2 hours and 25 quid. Okay, so that is how you can help with the teams collaborating, really, the information at source from the individuals, either by themselves or on their behalf by their team leader, and formulate the time entry to then come through into the system and ultimately onto the payroll. We now want to move on and have a look at the forms module, the mobile forms module available to Evolution MX as an additional module. It sits nicely alongside your document management module, and it allows for forms to be designed for your own requirements. You're able to do this yourself, or obviously with assistance from Integrity Software, to compile whatever template forms you want to use and make available for use within the field. We access this through a mobile app. So if I just go in and launch the mobile app, I'm doing this on a browser basis, but typically this would be on a mobile device. If I just make my screen look a little bit more like a tablet, best suited to tablets, iPads or Galaxies, simply because of the screen sizing, really. No technical limitation as to why it couldn't be a phone, but there may be considerations where that's maybe not that appropriate. So here I'm going to log in on the app to allow me to go in through security. And then I'll be presented with a menu relevant to what I've been allowed to do within that app. Now, the app itself today is going to be associated with the forms creation. There are other aspects available to the app, such as raising of purchase orders and goods received notes, which we'll happily look at with you another time. But for today, we're looking at the form side. Click into the forms menu, of which you can see there's a sub-choice of 10, and it will show for you all of the forms that have been decided are relevant for this particular individual. So you can separate your users into groups and then issue forms to certain groups of users. So not everybody necessarily sees everything. Depending on what their task is, it'll be relevant for them maybe to only have certain forms. I'll use here an example of an accident or incident form. So I'll load it up, show you that it now presents itself as the form that your operatives would normally be familiar with. They've maybe just been completing this on a manual basis. So the form sits in the background, and overlaid on top of it will be form data, where you've decided to capture the contract code, for example. So here I can get a live listing of my jobs. This will be synchronized to the device, so they're always getting up-to-date relevant contract information. Other fields can be configured in a way that allows them to select easily from a calendar. There may be free format fields that are allowed to make text entry. There could be capture fields. A photograph could be captured using the camera icon if the device has got a camera enabled. If not, then you're able to access the gallery or the folder structure that sits beneath that device. So here I could go in and just pick up on a file that I've got stored already. It gives me a count there indicating that you can have more than one capture on that same field. And in fact, you could have more than one place on the form that you actually capture the additional files. Other fields could be presented as a choice field. So we're saying here that my choices available are yes, no. It can help with uniform completion of the form and make sure that people are filling in the right areas of the form in a way that could then be of use to others going forward. Other fields could be set with multiple choices, so it's up to you how many choices are, and you can easily manage that level of choice that you've got made available to them. I've got a signature field at the bottom, which allows me to capture a live signature. It is just one of what could be several signatures. You might have a tenant or a client signature, as well as the operative signature. So it allows that to be captured as part of the form. Other form is certain requirements on them. So my time lost, for example, I've set as a mandatory field, which means if I try and shortcut and just submit what I've done so far, it will stop me from doing so because it's saying, no, time lost as a field has been defined with a mandatory entry requirement. So as the operative, I'm not allowed to leave it empty. I've got to put something in there before I can submit it. Now, if he's not ready to submit the form as yet, then that can just be saved as it is, and then he can return to the completion of the form on his own device. It won't go off the device until he's hit that submit button. When the submit is hit, then that will clear it from the device, synchronize as it's doing now top right there, back to your main system. So collaborating the information that's recorded at site back to the rest of the team. And that form may now appear immediately against that contract because I linked it to that job number with inside Evolution MX. I do stress that it may, because it depends really on whether you want it to go directly to the contract or whether you'd like it to go through some kind of approval or authorization process. Typically, of course, health and safety related forms would need to go to somebody with that responsibility, just so they get a heads up as to what's happening on site and maybe need to take any relevant action. So as it stands, that form will be within the system, albeit not visible as yet against that particular contract. If I go into my contract, I'm going to choose here to access it by selecting it from a contract list and then having a dashboard drawn up relevant to that particular contract. Various tiles here that can be configured to give you summary information about that particular job. I've got a tile here which is for contract documents. If I click into that, that'll show me all of the documents that are currently present against that contract. There are some within the incident form section, but those will only be historical ones. Those aren't going to be the current ones because I've asked for that form I've just completed to only go there once approval has been given. Now the approval can be handled in one of two ways. I've got an approvals menu here within my MX system. And if I click onto that, I'll have visible to me the forms that have been submitted where I am the recognized approver. So I'd be able to click. I've actually got two there because if you remember, I attached an additional file to the device as well. So I can choose here just to approve them, in which case that is now the indication to tell the system that those documents are okay to appear against that contract. The other route to approval could be purely by email, where on recognition that the form needs your approval, it could send you an email. So you're not expected to log into Evolution MX at all. The email would include an attachment of the form that's being submitted and with the option for you to reply with the words either approve or reject to have that form added to the contract. So that's your alternative way if somebody's not going to be that regular user or find it more convenient to act upon email. So as a result of what I've just done in terms of approval, then returning to the contract will allow me through the dashboard, but you could access it through normal contract inquiry if you wanted to. Documents are always going to be there. You then have incident forms moved to the top, indicating there's a new entry, and there will be the new form that you saw me just complete, as well as the attachment of the file. Okay, so that form was designed within the system. As I say, you've got the ability to do this yourself, or you can rely upon Integrity software to do that for you. Within the incidents menu, you'll notice that within my site file, I've got a separate menu item for each type of form. So the incident form itself was designed through here. I go into, you can see the preview of on the bottom right-hand side there, but if I go into my form option and access Run Form Designer, then I'll be able to have access to the form. So in the background is the form that you'd be familiar with, and overlaid with it is going to be the fields that I was expected the user to complete as part of the mobile operation. So this just explains really what was happening on that form that we just saw. So the contract code field has been defined as a text field. There's your choice for the different types of fields you can have. So it could be dates, it could be check boxes for ticks, it could be signatures, it could be attachments, it could be any number of different characteristics associated with that. I've also told it to use the search on the Evolution M mobile contract set of data, if you like, that's synchronized to the mobile device. Elsewhere, I've got other fields, such as the date. Logically, of course, that would be set therefore as a date field. My statements field was set with choices, if you remember. The choices that I made available have been entered into the pick list field. So simply separating them by a semicolon makes them appear as a list for selection on your choices. My photo was an attachment field, so that's just been set with the characteristics of attach. Further down, if you remember, I had a field which was not letting me leave it empty. So if I click onto it, we can see that it's a normal text field, numeric, but it's been marked as mandatory. So I'm not allowed to leave that particular field empty. Okay, so that's how the form was designed. I'll just show you how you could bring in a new form, just to show you how it's available to be set up. So if I go back to my main menu, move my screen out of the way so I can get access to the toolbar at the top. So if I go back to my main menu, let's use a menu item that I haven't so far got a form for. So I've set it up in readiness, RAMS, a risk assessment, and I'll just move that out of the way. Go to the form that I've been currently using. It happens to be a Word document. Drag and drop it alongside that menu item. So we're adding it now as a template to Evolution MX. Make it full screen for you so you can see better what's going on. Bottom right then gives you a preview as to what that form is currently looking like. I'll then just go into the form designer element of it, tick it as being a form, maybe also tick it as being a mobile form so that it could be sent to the relevant users, and you could segregate your users into groups and then select the group of users that's getting this particular form. So that means that not all users are going to get all forms because it's not necessarily relevant for them to. If it is, then a single group will do. Because it is now a form, I can run the form designer, and that will start by loading me in the background the blank form that you just saw me drag and drop in. I'm now able to use the toolbar at the top here to say add fields. And if I chose to, I could just add a new field onto the form, place it wherever it's relevant for me to use it, stretch it. If I need to, I can manually change the coordinates of it. So if I'd like to lower it slightly, I could override that and put in a higher or lower number just to put it in a slightly different position. It's up to you whether you drag and drop the fields around or whether you use the inbuilt parameters or the coordinates, I should say. Now that particular field can be given a name, so it could be that it's just going to be company. Right? And then you would tell it what the particular characteristics of that field were going to be. So this is where you set it to be text, date, or whatever it might be. Elsewhere, you might have another field that you want for the contract number, for example. That could allow you to change the field name again if you wanted to, just to say it's contract number. And here we could be using the search option towards the bottom, which is where we can tell it to go and use Evolution MX's list of contracts. So through the mobile section, I'll have certain lists of data available to me. So I can say, yeah, use that contract list as my search. That just makes a pop-up list of relevant contracts available at that form. I could then, in the center there, add another field which does a lookup on that list of contracts to give you the contract name to save you having to key that in on the form. That would be automatically assigned there. So carry on with this, putting on whatever forms that you want. Don't forget, though, to include the submit and cancel options. So the submit button will just be something that will be placed somewhere on the form. You can place it where you like, top, bottom, or wherever. And also include the cancel, just so that the operative has the ability to abort out from what they're doing. Often we find that's the easiest thing to put in, is put those in first, so at least you haven't forgotten them. Print option also if you wanted to. So that's how the form designer looks. It's not rocket science by any means. It's quite user-friendly to allow you to configure the forms that you want to be able to use. Now, the form data that's been input onto those forms is now available to be shared with the rest of the team through analytics. So the incident form, going back to the example I showed there, that will show you on the menu all incident forms that have been collated from site by whichever operative. So all people in the team can see them, including the entry that we just did a few minutes ago. There's the completed form. But all of the data that was input is now available to be reported upon. And we do that through the analytics function. So incidents analysis is going to use the Evolution MX analytics options. So this is going to show me for each of the forms that's been completed, all of the data that I want to see. So I'm able to pick and choose here on the plus icon to say, I want this field, I want that field, I want the other field, and I want them in these positions. So I could order them, put them wherever I like, and save that as a required report, really, to report upon, in this case, all incidents of all time. If you wanted to, You could limit the date range and say, I want this to be a specific date, or you have the option of being able to say it is the last 30 days, for example. So you could be assured that everything that's shown on this report is only going to be those that have occurred in the last 30 days. You don't have to keep remembering to reset those parameters. So you decide what the information is going to be. In this case, and it's giving me quite a useful heads up on the time lost total. And at the bottom, you can see 8.5 hours have been lost in total to all jobs within that range. But I might narrow that down and say, well, I'm interested in a particular contract code. So let's have a look and see what's happened on contract 0737. That could then just be a filtered view of that particular job. You've also got, as you can see, visible evidence of the signature that it's captured, and also any photo or attachments that you've chosen to use. My field I called photo, even though it was just going to be an attachment of an additional file. So it's your choice as to what it would be. On a mobile device, one I created earlier, there could be something which was actually created on the system as a photograph. Okay, so it's important that that information then is available to be shared with the rest of the team. It's been created at source through a user-friendly method based on existing forms that you've probably got or the users are familiar with. You've just built them into the forms module, configure them to capture the data in the way that you want to, and ultimately be able to report upon it. And crucially, of course, have a documentary evidence of that file against the contract for all to be able to inquire upon. So that's the forms module. It's available for implementation. As I say, we'll assist you as far as you want to go with it, where you want to become self-sufficient in terms of the form designer, or whether you've got a handful of forms that you just want us to design and get you going. Okay, I'd like to thank you very much for your attendance today. We will be doing a follow-up to see if there's any particular interest. If there is anything that we can help you with, then please do let us know, and we'll be glad to entertain any requirements you've got on a one-to-one basis. But thanks very much for today.